My ex-military security team was being bullied out by our new female boss. Then Victor spotted her weakness and told the oil company, "Are you going to change the regulation to state that illegal drivers are now allowed on site?" Let me back up and explain how we got to this moment of pure tactical brilliance. This story involves everything from workplace manipulation to multi-million-dollar construction disasters. It all started when I desperately needed work after my medical discharge from the Army. I'd been bouncing between dead-end jobs, trying to support my girlfriend and her 2 kids. Then I landed an interview with a small security company. The moment they started grilling me with questions only a veteran would know, I knew I'd found my people. They immediately placed me on their biggest contract, a massive construction site where a major oil company was building their new headquarters. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar project running 24/7 to meet impossible deadlines. The setup was intense but rewarding. My gate alone processed 1,000 to 2,000 cars during each 8-hour shift, and there were 3 gates total. Every vehicle needed strict verification through our badge system and required proper stickers to enter the construction zone. The work was brutal, standing on concrete in all weather conditions, from scorching heat to hailstorms, with only construction hard hats for protection. We couldn't even use the guard shacks because we had to physically operate the verification machines and check vehicle stickers up close. But here's what made it amazing. Every single security guard was ex-military. We had this incredible brotherhood where everyone covered for each other, worked double shifts when needed, and our boss Jim understood the veteran mindset. No write-ups for calling in sick, plenty of overtime opportunities, and genuine respect for our service experience. I was making $15 an hour starting wage, which was exceptional for security work, specifically because they only hired veterans for this contract. 3 months in, a supervisor position opened up. The departing night supervisor encouraged me to apply, even though I was the newest guy on site. 2 others applied, a senior male guard and one of the 3 female guards on site, who'd been there about a year. During the interview process with Jim and Ray, our junior supervisor, I performed well enough to earn the promotion. That's when everything started falling apart. The female guard who didn't get promoted was absolutely furious. She actually stole my personal phone number from the emergency supervisor contact list and called me before I'd even been officially notified about the promotion. What followed was a threatening conversation where she accused everyone of sexism and demanded I resign the position to her, or she'd file complaints with HR that would get us all fired. I hung up and immediately reported the harassment to Jim and Ray. They assured me I'd earned the position fairly and filed their own harassment complaint against her for the phone theft and threats. She was eventually removed from the site, and I thought that was the end of it. I was catastrophically wrong. During my months as night supervisor, I developed a particularly strong friendship with Victor, a Marine veteran who'd served in the initial Iraq invasion. Victor had severe PTSD that made him confrontational and difficult, which is why most people avoided him. But I recognized a fellow warrior dealing with invisible wounds, and we connected immediately. I convinced him to seek VA counseling and supported his master's degree studies. Ray had also mentored Victor extensively. Between the 3 of us, we'd built a solid veteran support network on site. Then Jim mysteriously disappeared. After several days of no-shows, Ray called an emergency supervisor meeting. When we finally got answers from an HR contact, the truth was devastating. The vengeful female guard had made good on her threats. She'd hired a lawyer and was suing the company for sexism, favoritism, and sexual harassment. But here's the diabolical part. She hadn't just filed false complaints. She'd actually seduced Jim into a full sexual relationship, complete with sexting, explicit photos, and promises of promotions in exchange for sexual favors. The catch? She'd done it all using the company's supervisor phone, creating a perfect evidence trail. This woman was brilliant in her manipulation. She'd planned everything from the start, knowing the supervisor position would eventually open up. She pursued Jim romantically, playing submissive while making him take the dominant role in all their communications. When reviewed later, every message looked like classic workplace sexual harassment from a boss promising promotions for sex. Jim fled the moment he learned about the lawsuit. To avoid a massive legal battle, the company rehired her at increased pay plus bonuses and promised to hire more female supervisors. She dropped the lawsuit, We were left without a boss, and the 3 remaining supervisors had to run the entire operation ourselves. But the nightmare was just beginning because our lawsuit had triggered a complete restructuring of site management. The company brought in a new female boss named Tasha to satisfy the legal settlement terms. From day one, Tasha demonstrated complete disrespect for military veterans. She took 2 weeks to introduce herself to the supervisors and over a month to meet the guards. She didn't understand our military efficiency, our self-sufficiency, or our proven track record of excellent performance. More importantly, I quickly realized Tasha had a systematic plan to destroy our veteran-heavy workforce. She began writing up guards for absolutely ridiculous infractions. Stray threads on uniforms, slightly dirty boots, haircuts she didn't approve of, even writing up a guard because his uniform was wet during a rainstorm that he couldn't take shelter from due to duty requirements. The write-ups were technically within regulations, but represented the pettiest possible enforcement of minor rules. Her strategy became clear within weeks. She would focus intensive harassment on one individual guard at a time until they quit, then immediately shift focus to the next target. Within 2 months, 12 experienced employees had resigned, including Ray, the best leader I'd ever served under, and Victor's other close friend on site. The replacements were immediately suspicious. Instead of military veterans, we suddenly had moody, lazy civilians who would hide in guard shacks instead of properly verifying vehicles and badges. They had terrible attitudes with contractors and created constant problems with the professional relationships we'd built over years of excellent service. Through Ray's HR contact, we discovered the horrifying truth behind this systematic destruction of our team. Remember when Jim disappeared and someone had to take blame for the sexism lawsuit? The company had fired their veteran hiring specialist, the same person who had interviewed me with military-specific questions and built our incredible veteran workforce. So, no more qualified ex-military personnel were being sent to our site. But it gets worse. Tasha had previously been managing security for an office building contract that she'd lost. Not because the contract expired naturally, but because she and her guards were so incompetent that the building hired different security entirely. The person in charge of contracts was romantically involved with Tasha and covered up her failure, then transferred her to our site with a promotion and pay raise specifically because she was female and could satisfy the legal settlement requirements. The write-ups and harassment weren't random management incompetence. They were a deliberate strategy to force veteran resignations and trigger emergency staffing shortages that allowed the company to place non-military guards on our military-specific contract. Those lazy replacement guards, they were Tasha's old team from the building contract they'd bungled so badly they got fired. One by one, I watched dedicated veterans who'd served in combat zones get systematically harassed out of their jobs and replaced by incompetent cronies who'd already failed at easier assignments. When they started targeting me for harassment, I reached my breaking point and resigned. Ironically, I immediately found work at another company alongside Jim and Ray. We 3 were reunited with better pay and working conditions. We tried convincing Victor to join us, but the old Marine had different plans. Victor had stayed behind on a mission of pure tactical revenge. Here's where Victor's particular expertise became absolutely crucial to what happened next. During his time on site, he'd developed what could only be described as a supernatural ability to spot forged vehicle stickers from substantial distances. This skill was about to become Tasha's worst nightmare. See, the construction site had strict regulations requiring only licensed drivers with properly inspected registered vehicles. But construction companies routinely hired workers who couldn't meet these requirements. People with suspended licenses, unregistered vehicles, or immigration status issues. Someone had started a thriving business creating fake stickers and selling them to workers who couldn't qualify for legitimate access. Initially, the forgeries were crude, obviously handwritten modifications that any competent guard would catch immediately. But with Tasha's incompetent replacement guards who spent their shifts hiding in air-conditioned shacks instead of properly inspecting vehicles, the fake sticker business exploded. The forgeries improved to laser-printed professional quality that was nearly indistinguishable from authentic stickers. Victor positioned himself at the main entry gate and began systematically identifying and stopping vehicles with fraudulent stickers. The site regulations were crystal clear about fake sticker discovery procedures. Each violation required contacting a security supervisor, the site foreman, the violating worker's direct supervisor, and a police officer. The fake sticker had to be removed, the worker permanently banned from the site, and detailed incident reports filed with multiple parties. Within days, Victor was pulling over so many vehicles that Tasha had to assign herself permanent gate duty to handle the supervisor requirements. The site had to hire an additional police officer for permanent gate coverage, and the construction foreman assigned a dedicated representative to process the constant stream of violations. Victor began training the few competent replacement guards on fake sticker identification techniques, multiplying the detection rate exponentially. After a month of aggressive enforcement, the oil company executives were hemorrhaging money as construction companies began pulling their long-term contracts rather than deal with constant worker removals and project delays. The construction project, which should have been ahead of schedule, ground to a complete halt. Thousands of dollars in tools and equipment had been stolen due to inadequate exit inspections by Tasha's incompetent guards, creating massive delays even before the sticker crackdown began. Meanwhile, the oil company faced a financial catastrophe they hadn't anticipated. They'd sold their old headquarters building, expecting to move into the new construction on schedule. When construction stopped, they had to pay inflated rent to stay in their sold building, watching their stock price drop. As investors realized the company was burning money on housing costs while their new headquarters sat unfinished, the oil company executives called an emergency meeting with Tasha and Victor, begging him to stop enforcing the sticker regulations because he was single-handedly destroying their construction timeline and costing them millions in delays and contract penalties. That's when Victor delivered the tactical masterstroke that still gives me chills. The executive spent an hour explaining the financial devastation his sticker enforcement was causing. Construction companies were refusing to work with them. Contractors were demanding penalty payments for project delays. The company's stock was falling. They were paying double rent on 2 buildings. The entire corporate headquarters project was in jeopardy. When they finished their presentation, Victor asked one simple question that revealed the complete absurdity of their position. Are you going to change the regulation to state that illegal drivers are now allowed on site? Of course, they couldn't change safety regulations to allow unlicensed drivers and unregistered vehicles on a construction site. Their insurance wouldn't cover it. Federal safety regulations prohibited it, and they'd face massive liability for any accidents. But they also couldn't afford Victor's continued enforcement of existing regulations. Victor had created the perfect tactical trap. By following regulations exactly as written, he'd exposed how the entire construction project had been operating illegally for years, relying on systematic safety violations that no one wanted to acknowledge or address. The meeting ended with no resolution. Victor returned to his gate and continued his mission. A few days later, a construction accident occurred on site. Even though the cause was unrelated to vehicle licensing issues, Victor was made the scapegoat and terminated for creating unsafe conditions through excessive enforcement. Everyone knew it was complete nonsense, but Victor didn't care. He'd accomplished exactly what he set out to do, expose the systematic corruption and incompetence that had destroyed our veteran team, while costing the responsible parties millions of dollars in the process. The aftermath was everything we could have hoped for. Tasha was eventually fired for her catastrophic mismanagement of the site. The construction delays, security failures, theft problems, and regulatory enforcement crisis had made her position untenable. When she applied for work at other companies, Jim's presence as a supervisor at our new company ensured she never got past the initial screening. The oil company never recovered their construction timeline and ended up paying massive cost overruns to complete their headquarters. The systematic replacement of competent veterans with incompetent cronies had cost them far more than simply respecting the military workforce they had originally contracted for. Victor achieved something remarkable. He'd used institutional regulations as a weapon against the very system that had betrayed veteran employees. By demanding perfect compliance with stated company policies, he'd revealed the hypocrisy and corruption underlying the entire operation. The best part? Every action Victor took was completely within proper procedures. He couldn't be accused of sabotage, insubordination, or misconduct. He'd simply done his job exactly as the regulations specified, with a level of competence that exposed everyone else's failures. That's the difference between military veterans and civilian management. We understand that regulations exist for reasons, that competence matters, and that systematic problems require systematic solutions. When Tasha's cronies thought they could replace experienced professionals with lazy incompetence, they underestimated what happens when motivated veterans decide to demonstrate the difference through direct comparison. Victor's tactical brilliance had turned their own system against them, costing millions in delays and exposing the corruption that had destroyed our team. In my book, that's a complete victory achieved through pure professional competence and strategic thinking. Sometimes the best revenge is simply doing your job better than anyone thought possible.